On the 25th of December, 2024, when most of the world was celebrating Christmas with joy, a nightmare was unfolding thousands of meters above the Earth. Flight 8243 of Azerbaijan Airlines, an Embraer 190 carrying 67 people, left Baku for Grozny in what should have been a routine journey of just 2 hours. Families on board expected nothing more than a peaceful arrival to spend the holiday together, but somewhere in Russian airspace, the routine turned into terror. Survivors later recalled hearing a deafening explosion, followed by sharp fragments of metal tearing through the cabin. Blood stained the seats, children screamed, and the pilots struggled desperately to regain control. The hydraulic system had failed, and the fuselage was pierced in several places, evidence not of accident, but of weaponry. Instead of guiding the damaged aircraft to the nearest Russian airports, air traffic control ordered it across the Caspian Sea toward Kazakhstan, forcing a crippled plane to fly over 400 kilometers of open water. Why would any authority give such an order? The answer, chilling as it is, suggests an attempt not to save lives, but to bury the truth. If the aircraft had gone down in the Caspian, wreckage and evidence would have been lost forever beneath the waves. Yet against all odds, the Azerbaijani pilots held the jet steady, managing to land in Kazakhstan. 38 lives were lost, but without their courage, none would have survived. Russia's explanations in the days that followed were shifting and absurd. First a flock of birds, then bad weather, then perhaps a Ukrainian drone. Putin himself even offered condolences, but stopped short of acknowledging any fault. What was presented as tragedy soon revealed itself as the spark of a geopolitical crisis, because this was not only about an aircraft, but about alliances, lies, and the unraveling of Moscow's influence. 7 months after the tragedy, the silence was broken. President Ilham Aliyev of Azerbaijan stood before his nation and delivered a statement that was nothing short of a political earthquake. His words were deliberate, sharp, and impossible to misinterpret. The idea that a Ukrainian drone had somehow attacked the aircraft was, in his words, a fairy tale for children. He emphasized that 2 separate strikes had hit the plane, a scenario that made Russia's explanation collapse under its own weight. The evidence was overwhelming. Multiple entry holes in the fuselage, survivors injured by shrapnel, and the recorded accounts of passengers who had heard explosions. Aliyev demanded 3 non-negotiable actions from Moscow: an admission of guilt, punishment of those responsible, and full compensation for the victims' families. These were not diplomatic requests. They were ultimatums. And when Russia refused, the consequences were immediate. What was once a pragmatic, if uneasy, alliance began to disintegrate in front of the entire world. Russia's airspace had not been closed in the crucial minutes after the strike, a failure that underscored negligence at best, complicity at worst. For Aliyev, this was not simply about aviation security. It was about dignity, sovereignty, and the refusal to let Azerbaijan be treated as expendable. His rhetoric was unprecedented. For decades, Moscow had dictated the narrative in the Caucasus, but now an ally dared to call Putin a liar openly, stripping away the aura of control Russia had cultivated. More alarming for the Kremlin, Azerbaijan was not turning inward but outward, gradually moving closer to Ukraine, a country Putin considered his existential adversary. What had begun as a tragedy in the sky was mutating into a realignment on the ground, and the foundations of Russian influence trembled. The message was unmistakable. Azerbaijan would no longer play by Moscow's rules. As Moscow refused to yield, the conflict took a darker turn. In Yekaterinburg, deep inside Russia, 2 Azerbaijani brothers, Ziadim and Rusum Safarov, were arrested in connection with a murder investigation. Days later, both were dead in custody. Official statements claimed one died of a heart attack, the other under unexplained circumstances. But in Baku, few believed this narrative. To Azerbaijan's government, the deaths were no accident. They were a message, a brutal demonstration that Russia could target Azerbaijani citizens within its borders at will. The reaction was immediate and unprecedented. The Azerbaijani government summoned the Russian ambassador, canceled cultural events tied to Moscow, and launched its own criminal investigation into torture and murder. Then came a move that shocked the diplomatic world. On the 30th of June, Azerbaijani police raided the offices of Sputnik, Russia's state-run news agency in Baku. The editor-in-chief and director were arrested, and investigators revealed something explosive. The bureau was being used as a covert base for the FSB, Russia's intelligence service. What had begun as a diplomatic dispute had now morphed into a confrontation in the shadows of espionage. Never before in the post-Soviet era had a former ally so openly unmasked Russian intelligence operations on its soil. And Aliyev was not finished. He took a step no other leader had dared. He banned Azerbaijani citizens from fighting for Russia or the Wagner Group, while legalizing their service for Ukraine. It was not merely defiance, it was an open declaration that Baku was willing to align militarily with Putin's greatest adversary. For Moscow, this was intolerable. Kremlin media struck back with conspiracy theories, accusing Azerbaijan of helping Ukraine orchestrate the devastating spiderweb sabotage campaign that destroyed drones, bombers, and cost Russia billions. Yet the truth was even more damning for Moscow. Azerbaijan was helping Ukraine openly, not in secret. Humanitarian aid, electricity equipment, demining technology assistance that showcased courage rather than covert plots. In this struggle, Baku was turning Moscow's strength, fear, into its own weapon of resolve. To understand why Azerbaijan suddenly had the courage to defy Moscow, we must go back to September 2023, when history shifted in the mountains of Nagorno-Karabakh. For 3 decades, this region had been a frozen conflict. Armenia occupied nearly 20% of Azerbaijani territory. Over 700,000 Azerbaijanis had been displaced, and Russia maintained leverage by arming both sides and freezing any permanent resolution. For years, this unresolved war was Moscow's most powerful tool to keep Baku under its thumb. But in September 2023, as Russia's army was bleeding in Ukraine, Azerbaijan launched a lightning offensive. In less than 24 hours, the separatist Republic of Nagorno-Karabakh was dissolved, its forces surrendered, and Azerbaijani troops reasserted control over the entire territory. Russian peacekeepers, deployed as supposed guarantors, stood by powerless, unwilling, or unable to intervene. For Aliyev, this was not only a military victory, it was geopolitical liberation. For the first time since independence, Azerbaijan was free of the central pressure point that Moscow had exploited for decades. The shackles of dependency were broken, and with them came a new sense of sovereignty. But that was only part of the equation. Azerbaijan also held a unique card, its alliance with Turkey. More than partnership, the two nations had signed a mutual defense pact, obligating each to defend the other in case of attack. With Turkey, a NATO member, Azerbaijan effectively had a shield backed by the most powerful military alliance in the world. Any Russian attempt to strike Azerbaijan directly risked escalation with NATO itself. For Putin, already overstretched in Ukraine, this was a risk he could not take. Thus, Azerbaijan gained strategic room to maneuver like never before. Baku no longer feared the Kremlin's retaliation. It could stand tall, support Ukraine, and even challenge Russian intelligence openly, knowing that Moscow's hands were tied. What had once been a fragile post-Soviet state was now emerging as a regional power, confident and unafraid. Yet Azerbaijan's defiance was not built on military strength alone. Economic power became its second weapon. While Russia relied on its monopoly over trade routes between Asia and Europe, Azerbaijan began building what is now called the Middle Corridor, a new artery stretching from China through Central Asia, across the Caspian, through Azerbaijan, Georgia, and Turkey, and finally into Europe. This route bypassed Russian territory entirely, cutting Moscow out of the very trade flows that had sustained its geopolitical leverage for decades. Ports were modernized, railways expanded, and shipping lines redirected. Since the invasion of Ukraine, sanctions pushed commerce away from Russia and toward Azerbaijan, transforming Baku into a vital hub. For Putin, this was more than economic loss, it was a strategic nightmare. It meant Azerbaijan was not only breaking free militarily and politically, but also constructing an economic future beyond Moscow's reach. And Russia, stretched thin, had limited options. Troops were redeployed to the Armenian border, military bases in Gyumri reinforced, propaganda campaigns intensified. But the reality was unavoidable. Moscow no longer had the capacity to dominate the Caucasus. Its power was eroding, not by revolution or war, but by rejection, neighbors refusing to live as satellites. Armenia turned toward Europe, Kazakhstan opened doors to independent investigations, and Georgia quietly took notes on how Azerbaijan dared to stand tall. The downing of Flight 8243 had lit a fuse far larger than a single tragedy. It revealed that Russia's empire of influence was brittle, its control fading. President Aliyev's declaration that Russian explanations were stories for children was more than rhetoric. It was a geopolitical manifesto. Azerbaijan had declared independence in spirit as well as in law. Now the question lingers. Will the partnership between Azerbaijan and Ukraine grow into a true alliance that reshapes the balance of power across Eurasia? Or is it only the beginning of a larger confrontation that Putin cannot stop? The future remains uncertain, but one truth is clear. On that Christmas morning, the world witnessed not just a tragedy in the sky, but the dawn of a new geopolitical era. If you value deep analysis of global conflicts, subscribe to this channel, share your thoughts in the comments, and join us as we uncover the stories that shape our world.